The room was silent. Too silent. A month ago, this same office had been electric. Whiteboards covered in chaotic scribbles, coffee cups stacked like trophies, keyboards clattering under the weight of ambition. Now, it was a graveyard of abandoned chairs and scattered papers, haunted only by the hollow hum of the air conditioner. In the center of it all sat Caleb Knox, staring at the glowing screen of a laptop that wouldn't stop showing him numbers he didn't want to see. Red lines, downward arrows, warnings, overdraft notices. This was the empire he had once promised would change the world, and it was dying in front of him. Just 1 year earlier, Caleb had been called unstoppable. He had built Skybound Labs, a scrappy startup that had exploded out of nowhere with a revolutionary AI-driven logistics system. Software that could slash delivery times, cut waste, and save companies millions. Investors swarmed. Media adored him. They called him the next Bezos, the architect of the future. He gave talks at tech conferences wearing black hoodies and sneakers, grinning as the crowds roared. Back then, he believed he was destined for greatness. But destiny didn't pay invoices. Skybound grew too fast. He took every deal offered, expanded too quickly, promised too much. When the first cracks appeared, glitches in the software that delayed shipments, contracts that overpromised savings, Caleb brushed them aside. "We'll fix it later," he told his team, smiling through the panic. Then, one night, a catastrophic system failure paralyzed half a dozen major shipping networks. Millions of dollars in damages. Lawsuits. Contract cancellations. And just like that, Skybound imploded. The investors fled first. Then the board voted him out as CEO. The press turned on him with gleeful cruelty. From prodigy to punchline, one headline sneered. His friends stopped calling. His closest confidant sold his shares and vanished without even saying goodbye. Even his co-founder, his best friend since college, left with a single cold text, "I can't go down with you." Within weeks, Caleb lost everything. The office emptied. The servers were sold off. His bank accounts drained into legal fees and severance checks. And now, on this cold Monday morning, he was the last one left. He closed the laptop. The silence pressed in like a physical weight. He had spent 12 years of his life building this dream. And now it was rubble. Caleb stood, walked to the glass wall that overlooked the city skyline, and pressed his forehead against the cold window. Below him, the world rushed on. Cars honking, people bustling, unaware that the man who once swore he'd reshape their future couldn't even pay next month's rent. He thought about walking away, about vanishing. No one would care. No one was left to notice. He stayed at the window a long time, until the sunlight faded into bruised twilight and the city lights blinked on one by one. Then he turned and looked at the empty desks. Each one was a memory, late-night laughter, wild arguments, impossible dreams. The people who had believed in him once, they had all walked away, and maybe they were right too. But somewhere deep inside the wreckage of his chest, something stubborn still burned. A small, flickering flame that refused to die. It whispered, "Not like this." He walked back to the table, grabbed a dry erase marker, and wiped the dust off the whiteboard. In the center, he drew a single word in jagged black strokes. Rebuild. No investors. No team. No safety net. Just him. For the first time in months, his hands stopped shaking. If he had to crawl through the ashes alone, he would. They had all walked away, and he would build an empire without them. The first days after the collapse felt like living inside an echo. Caleb woke each morning in the corner of the abandoned office, the sun slanting through cracked blinds, the air stale with the ghost of old coffee. He had no team, no clients, and almost no money. His phone stayed dark. No messages, no calls. But every morning, he stood, brushed the dust off his clothes, and faced the whiteboard where one word glared back at him in thick black marker: rebuild. He started with nothing but silence and stubbornness. At first, he didn't even try to rebuild Skybound. That world was gone. Instead, he focused on something small and sharp, like a blade. A lean, stripped-down version of the original software. Just the core algorithm that had once made it revolutionary. Rebuilt from scratch with none of the bloated features that had buried it. He worked like a man possessed. Days blurred. Nights disappeared. He forgot meals, forgot sleep, living on cheap energy bars and vending machine coffee from the building lobby. The rest of the floor was empty now, but at night the city lights glowed through the glass like distant stars, and Caleb typed as if the universe might stop spinning if he didn't. Failure was a constant shadow. Bugs crashed his code every few hours. He'd slam his fists on the desk, then drag himself up and keep going. He lost weight. His hands trembled from exhaustion. More than once, he caught himself whispering to the empty room, just to hear a voice. There were moments he almost quit. But then he remembered the day Skybound had died. The headlines, the sneers, the boardroom full of cold eyes as they voted him out. He remembered standing alone as the last employees packed their things, not one of them looking back. He used the memory like fuel. Every line of code was a defiance. You left. I'm still here. Weeks crawled by. Slowly, painfully, the skeleton of something new emerged on his screen. He called it Atlas. It wasn't pretty. It had no glossy interface or sleek design. But it worked. The algorithm was leaner, faster, smarter, capable of coordinating massive shipments with almost eerie efficiency. Still, Atlas was worthless without data to test it on. And Caleb had no resources left. So he did something desperate. He spent days hanging around loading docks and delivery hubs, watching trucks come and go. He struck up conversations with drivers, asking about their routes, their frustrations, their wasted time. Most ignored him. A few laughed at him. But one night, in a cold shipping yard on the edge of the city, a grizzled logistics manager named Hank finally listened. "You built that Skybound thing, didn't you?" Hank said, squinting at him. "I did," Caleb admitted. "Thought you were gone." "Not yet." Hank chuckled, a dry sound. "We've got a warehouse bleeding money from bad routing. You fix it, you get access to our route data. You fail, you disappear." Caleb shook his hand. For 3 weeks, he lived inside Hank's warehouse. He mapped every route, tracked every shipment, tore apart their schedule like a surgeon. He installed Atlas quietly on their systems. And then he watched. Within a week, their delivery times dropped by 30%. Fuel costs fell. Trucks stopped sitting idle. Hank stared at the numbers like they were magic. "Damn," he muttered. "You actually did it." Word spread quietly. Other warehouses called. Small companies first, then bigger ones. They didn't care about his reputation. They cared about results. Caleb never told them he was the only one building Atlas. He just showed up, worked silently, and left before anyone could ask questions. Money began to trickle in. Not much, but enough to keep the lights on and buy real food again. Still, the loneliness gnawed at him. He missed the chaos of a team, the whiteboards crammed with wild ideas, the energy of shared obsession. Now, when he cracked a breakthrough at 3 a.m., no one was there to see it. When he hit a wall, no one was there to lift him. But that isolation carved him into something new. There was no one left to save him. So he saved himself. Every setback became a lesson. Every bug became a teacher. Every doubt became a dare. Months passed. Atlas grew stronger, sleeker, faster. And then, one night, Caleb sat back from the screen and realized something shocking. This version wasn't just as good as Skybound. It was better. Much better. Skybound had been bloated, chaotic, over-designed. Atlas was lean, ruthless, precise. It could handle 10 times the data on 1/10 the servers. It was everything he had dreamed of building, without the noise of 100 opinions drowning him. He stared at the glowing lines of code, heart pounding, and whispered, "I'm not done." But if Atlas was going to be more than his secret project, he had to risk everything again. So he scraped together every cent he had left, bought a new domain, and built a bare-bones website. No flashy design, no hype, just 3 words in black on a white page. "We fix logistics." And at the bottom, "Powered by Atlas." He hit publish at 2:14 a.m. on a Tuesday, sitting alone in the dark. Then he closed the laptop, laid back on the floor, and stared at the ceiling. Outside, the city roared on, unaware that a man everyone had abandoned had just placed the first stone of an empire. The first email came 3 days after he launched the website. Caleb almost deleted it, thinking it was spam. But the subject line froze him. Urgent logistics help. Need immediate response. It was from a regional shipping company in Ohio. Their operations were collapsing under a surge of orders, and they had stumbled across his bare-bones site. Caleb barely slept that weekend. He tore into their data like a man possessed, running Atlas against their bloated, failing system. Within a week, their delivery efficiency jumped by nearly 40%. Word spread like wildfire. Within a month, 5 more companies signed on. Then 10. Then 20. They didn't care that he had no office, no team, no fancy branding. They cared that Atlas worked. It cut their costs. It saved them money. It turned chaos into order. And with every success, something dangerous stirred in Caleb's chest. Pride. For months he had worked in silence, invisible, forgotten. Now his inbox was flooded with contracts, and money was finally flowing back into his account. He stopped sleeping on the office floor and rented a tiny studio. He bought real food again. He caught himself standing taller in mirrors. But pride has a sharp edge. He told himself he could keep handling everything alone. He refused to hire anyone. He coded all night, handled sales calls by day, managed customer support in between. His phone buzzed until his hands shook from exhaustion. Still, Atlas kept growing. Soon his servers were overwhelmed. He upgraded them, then upgraded again, draining every cent back into the system. The traffic graphs looked like rockets taking off. Then the media found him. It started small, an industry blog calling Atlas the ghost system revolutionizing logistics. Then a business magazine wanted an interview. Caleb said no, but they ran the article anyway, plastering his photo from old Skybound press kits under the headline, "The Man Who Refused to Die." Suddenly, old names resurfaced. Former colleagues messaged him cautiously. Investors who once abandoned him sent emails full of hollow praise. His phone buzzed until it felt like part of his skin. And for the first time in years, he was scared. Because he recognized this storm. It was the same flood of attention that had destroyed Skybound. Praise that turned to pressure, pressure that turned to panic. He tried to block it out. He told himself Atlas was different, that he was different. But cracks were forming. He was working 20-hour days, skipping meals again, shaking from exhaustion. Bugs slipped through his code. One update crashed a client's entire system for 6 hours, costing them hundreds of thousands. The client threatened to sue. Caleb stayed up for 3 nights straight patching the bug. When he finally fixed it, he collapsed on the floor and slept for 14 hours. When he woke up, his inbox was full of new requests. More contracts. More pressure. He told himself it was worth it, that he could carry it alone. But deep down, he knew he was walking the same path that had destroyed him before. Then came the call that changed everything. It was from Titan Freight, one of the largest shipping corporations in the country. They wanted a meeting. When Caleb arrived at their skyscraper headquarters, he felt like an imposter. He wore the only clean shirt he owned. The executives in their sharp suits looked at him like they were examining an exotic animal. Their proposal was staggering. They wanted to integrate Atlas across their entire global network. Millions of shipments, billions in revenue. Caleb's mind spun. This was it. The chance to finally prove everyone wrong. But their terms were brutal. They wanted full ownership of Atlas's code. He would work for them, not with them. He asked for time to think. That night, he sat in the silent office, staring at the contract. His heart pounded. If he signed, he'd be rich beyond anything he'd imagined. Overnight, the world would know his name again. But Atlas would no longer be his. And he remembered the boardroom at Skybound, the cold eyes as they stripped his company from him. His chest tightened. He closed the contract without signing. But doubt clawed at him. What if he blew his only chance? What if he lost everything, again? He stopped sleeping. He stopped answering calls. His head throbbed from exhaustion. He worked until his fingers cramped, as if sheer motion could drown out the choice tearing him apart. One night, while running diagnostics, he caught his reflection in the dark screen. His eyes were hollow. He looked like he had at the end of Skybound. And in that moment, something hit him like a blade of ice. He was building an empire again, and he was doing it the same way that destroyed the first one. The office was buzzing again. Not the quiet hum of focus, the sharp, frantic buzz of something about to snap. Stacks of contracts crowded the desks. Servers hummed hot under the weight of new clients. The phone never stopped ringing. The world had rediscovered Caleb Knox, and this time it wanted everything all at once. But inside, Caleb was hollowing out. He barely slept. His diet had collapsed back into caffeine and adrenaline. His hands trembled from the constant typing. His eyes burned from the blue glare of screens. He was doing everything: coding, signing contracts, troubleshooting, handling customer crises, because he still refused to trust anyone else with Atlas. The system he had built to be clean and precise was starting to crack under the chaos. Bugs multiplied. Clients complained. One major retailer threatened to sue after a glitch delayed an entire holiday shipment line. And still Caleb refused to stop. He told himself this was how empires were built. Through pain, through pressure. But in the quiet moments, when the phones went silent and the servers dimmed, he knew the truth. He was becoming the man who had destroyed Skybound. The same man who had burned through people like fuel, who had chased growth until it consumed everything. And this time, there was no one left to walk away. No team to quit in protest. No board to stop him. If he burned it down, it would be only his hands on the match. The breaking point came quietly. At 3:47 a.m. On a Tuesday, Caleb was running a late-night system patch when his vision blurred. The code on his screen dissolved into static. He blinked, then blinked again, and felt his body tip sideways. He woke up on the floor, cheek pressed to cold concrete, the room spinning. It took 10 minutes to sit up. There was dried blood on his lip where he had hit the ground. And for the first time, he was afraid. Not of losing Atlas, of losing himself. He sat there in the darkness, clutching his shaking hands, and finally whispered, "I can't do this alone anymore." The words tasted like failure, but they felt like air. The next morning, he called someone he hadn't spoken to in a year. Aiden Wells, his old co-founder. The friend who had left him during Skybound's collapse. Aiden didn't pick up at first. When he finally answered, his voice was wary. "Caleb, I'm not calling to win you back," Caleb said. "I just need someone who will tell me if I'm about to destroy everything again." There was a long silence. Then Aiden said, "Meet me." They sat in a quiet diner at the edge of the city. Two men who had once built dreams together and then watched them burn. "I hated you," Aiden said flatly. "I know," Caleb replied. "You tried to carry everything. You crushed everyone trying to help." "I know," Caleb said again. "And now?" Caleb stared at his coffee, hands steady for the first time in weeks. "Now I'm carrying it alone. And it's killing me." Aiden studied him for a long moment. Then he said, "So stop." Caleb laughed bitterly. "Stop? I can't. If I slow down, it all falls apart." "Then build something that won't fall apart just because you do," Aiden said. The words landed like a punch. Because that was the truth Caleb had never admitted. He hadn't built Atlas to last. He had built it to prove he could do it alone. And that meant it was still fragile. They talked for hours. About systems, about safety, about trust. About what leadership actually meant. Not carrying everything, but building something that could carry itself. When Caleb left the diner, the city lights glowed like distant fires. But for the first time, the weight on his chest had shifted. He went back to the office, called a team-wide meeting. The tiny handful of contractors and engineers he had hired piecemeal, but never really trusted. They gathered awkwardly, expecting orders, maybe even anger. Instead, Caleb said, "I built this wrong. I built it like a fortress. It has to be a city." They stared at him. "I don't want to be the center of it anymore," he continued. "I want to be one part of it. I want to build something that doesn't die if I fall down." Silence. Then one by one, they nodded. It was a small moment, but it changed everything. Caleb stopped trying to be the empire. He became the architect. They reorganized the entire operation. He gave each person ownership over their piece of the system. They rewrote Atlas from the ground up with safety nets, redundancies, checks. Bugs disappeared. Efficiency surged. The tension drained from the office like poison being pulled from a wound. For the first time, Caleb slept. The temptation didn't vanish overnight. The hunger to do it all himself still lurked like an old scar. But each day, it loosened its grip. Then Titan Freight called again. They had seen the turnaround. They wanted Atlas. This time, Caleb didn't panic. He didn't chase. He simply said, "You don't get the code. You get access. On our terms." They agreed. And with that, Atlas leapt from a small operation to a global backbone almost overnight. But this time, Caleb didn't work 20-hour days. He didn't lose himself. He stood at the center of the storm like a man who finally knew how to stand. Everyone had walked away. And somehow, by letting go, he had built something stronger than anything they had abandoned. The world changed quietly. There was no explosion, no triumphant parade, just the slow, steady hum of something unshakable finally taking root. Within a year, Atlas was everywhere. Warehouses on 3 continents ran on it. Cargo ships used it to chart fuel-efficient routes. Emergency relief convoys used it to deliver supplies faster than governments could react. What had begun as a desperate project in an empty office had become the hidden skeleton of global movement. And yet, Caleb Knox no longer lived like a man at the center of a storm. He had traded chaos for structure. He worked 8-hour days now, sometimes less. He spent mornings walking through the buzzing new Atlas headquarters, a sunlit, open building full of glass and laughter, not to command, but to listen. There were whole teams now, developers, analysts, designers, logistics experts. They argued and brainstormed, scribbled on whiteboards, celebrated wins together. They rarely needed him. And that was the point. Caleb had once believed greatness meant carrying everything alone. Now he knew true greatness meant building something that didn't collapse when you stepped away. He kept his old desk tucked in a quiet corner, not in the CEO's office, but in the shared workspace. Most new hires didn't even recognize him at first. He liked it that way. He wasn't trying to be the empire anymore. He had built one, and then learned how to let it stand on its own. The old ghost still whispered sometimes. When Atlas hit milestones, when journalists called him visionary, when investors sent congratulatory bottles of wine, the echo of his past self stirred, the arrogant boy from the skybound days who believed he was invincible. But now Caleb knew how to silence that ghost, by walking out of the spotlight. He turned down interviews. He skipped award ceremonies. He gave credit publicly to his team and quietly slipped away when the applause started. Because he knew how fragile applause could be. The real reward was something quieter. Like the day an Atlas-powered medical convoy reached a flooded village in Indonesia 2 days ahead of schedule and saved dozens of lives. Or when a young engineer in the company stopped him in the hallway to say, "I used to think I wasn't good enough for a place like this until you trusted me." Or when Aiden visited the new headquarters and stood looking around at the busy floor, shaking his head in disbelief. "You did it," he said. "No," Caleb replied, smiling faintly. "We did." Aiden grinned. "You sound like a real leader now." Caleb just shrugged. "Took me long enough." The world finally accepted Atlas as permanent. Not a miracle, not a gamble, just a part of life. And Caleb, for the first time, felt free. Free from proving himself. Free from the weight of other people's applause. Free from the terror of losing everything again. Because he knew that if it all vanished tomorrow, he could build again. He had built alone once. He had built with others now. And he had finally learned the truth. Empires aren't built on pride. They're built on perseverance. 1 year later, he stood on a stage for the first time in years, not to announce a product, but to speak to a crowd of students at a university. He told them the story, not the shiny version, not the headlines, the real version. The nights alone, the silence, the collapse. The moment everyone walked away. And how he stayed. He ended with this. You don't need a crowd to build something great. You don't need applause to matter. You just need to keep showing up when everyone else stops. The world walked away from me. And that's when I became unstoppable. The room went silent. Then the students rose to their feet, clapping, shouting his name. Caleb smiled, stepped away from the microphone, and left through the side door before they could swarm him. Outside, the sunlight was warm. The city roared around him, alive and endless. He thought about the first night after Skybound fell, when he stood at that office window, staring at the skyline, believing it was all over. It hadn't been the end. It had been the beginning. And if you're hearing this, if your world has gone silent, if everyone has walked away from you, stay one more day, stay stay one more night. Stay and build with what's left, even if it's just your bare hands and stubborn heart. Because you don't need them to believe in you yet. You just need to keep going until they have no choice. Empires aren't born in applause. They're born in the quiet, when no one is watching and you refuse to quit. So stand up and start now.